if I have a day in my life where there's a chance that I can see an elk, that's going to be a really good
Good
day.
day.
It's
Yes,
going to be
sir.
a good day.
Yes, sir.
I had one of those days today. Did not see an elk, but I was in a place where I could have, and
Hmm.
that made it a good day. And it really does make a difference. So
You see, I'm
I'm happy
smiling.
for you, buddy. I'm happy
Thank
for
you,
you.
brother. Yeah, it's funny because I tell people that and they're like, why are you moving? And I'm like, well, we can talk politics and we can talk, tired of being urban. But it's really a lot of it has to do with me wanting to be around these animals, and people will laugh and they don't understand it. And then I realized that I need to tell them the story and tell them what's delivered from those animals. And it's such a great conversation, especially when I have that conversation with people that don't hunt or don't get the animal, and they'll look and they're like, man, that is just an amazing animal. And I'm like, exactly, move me where they are and we're okay.
These are stories of outdoor adventure and expert advice from folks with calloused hands. I'm James Nash, and this is the Six Ranch Podcast. The Six Ranch Podcast is brought to you by Sig Sauer. SIG is a leading provider and manufacturer of firearms, electro-optics, ammunition, air guns, and suppressors. For over 250 years, Sig Sauer Inc. has evolved and thrived by blending American ingenuity, German engineering, and Swiss precision. Today, Sig Sauer is synonymous with industry-leading quality and innovation, which has made it the brand of choice amongst the U.S. military, the global defense community, law enforcement, competitive shooters, hunters, and responsible citizens. Sig Sauer is also a premier provider of elite firearms instruction and tactical training at the Sig Sauer Academy located in New Hampshire. For more information about Sig Sauer and its complete line of products, visit sigsauer.com.
What about your story do you feel like hasn't been told?
Man, I pretty much tell everything, brother. You know, I'm an open book, right? And I try and wear my heart on my sleeve when it comes to hunting. And maybe I'm not the best at displaying those things, and getting the message across in terms of how I value it and the reason that it's valued to me so much, and what it's done to change my life and in my opinion, and it's factual, make me a better person, because of the pursuit.
So when did hunting start for you?
Early 20s, early 20s.
So before that, I mean, you're talking about a change. So what changed? Like what was going on before you started hunting that hunting changed?
you know, I didn't I didn't understand myself. One, I didn't understand or look at and respect the circle of life and the appreciation and respect for all life. I didn't have a clue. And just, some insights to that. I grew up in LA Basin, right? It's as urban as it can get, right? And people have their jabs and their jokes about what LA is. And it hasn't always been as bad as it is, but it wasn't something that there was a ton of exposure to. But the things and I grew up poor, right? And when you talk about LA, inner city ghettos, things like that, it's legitimate, right?
I
So
want to hear
there's
about that. I
things.
don't know what that even means. Like I've seen shit on TV, but I don't know. I grew up in a super rural place
Mhm.
that in many ways is the opposite of what you're talking
Oh,
about,
dude,
right?
absolutely.
I didn't see people. I don't think I saw somebody that I didn't know until I was like a teenager, right? And I know that doesn't make sense because of course you're going to meet people, but at least these were people that like my parents knew, or like there was one degree of separation because it was such a small community. I feel like in a city, you're seeing people that you don't know constantly. And
Every minute.
yeah, and
Yeah.
that's a really wild thing to me.
It
So what's it
okay.
like growing up poor in LA?
Yeah, you hear those, and maybe you haven't. You hear the jokes about, you get your butt in before the street lights are on, and that wasn't because mom just wanted you in. That was because it got ugly. You know what I mean? Things were getting thick. The street lights came on, the sun was down, and in that time, I mean, that was the height of the crack epidemic in the 80s when I was born in the 70s, but coming up in the 80s, man, it was the height of crack. And living in the inner city in these urban areas, man, it was real, right? Gang violence, drive-by shootings. That's when, and I don't know if you remember, but LA had a rash of freeway shootings, and just basically random freeway drive-bys. I mean, that was life. So you got your butt in the house, or mom, unleashed the wrath on you because you weren't in, and it was, there was danger to be had if you were out after dark, and some of that danger, guys were told to get in. They were out there causing the havoc and the danger and stuff. And I never, fell into that kind of stuff per se. I was a scrappy one. I used to like to throw them, but never
How did you
never into
avoid
the
that?
violence end of it.
Like
I don't know.
It would be so much easier, and it seems to me like in some ways it would be safer to get involved with a gang than to not, because I'm sure there are guys trying to recruit you into that stuff.
I there was, and I could think of several instances. It was just something that I never got behind, right? I was never involved in. I've always been very to myself, and very pig-headed in things and how I see it. I'm even worse than that today, but I do value what I do value, like our demographic, the hunting demographic, right? And that's one of the things I guess we could talk about, but that has kind of brought me to where I am in this whole thing. They say you find your people. That's my people. And that wasn't my people. It just never did. It never impressed me. It never did anything. I had my uncle and a couple of my uncles. One would, that's what we would do is we go fishing, right? And I was a fisherman. You couldn't tell me any different. I'd go to the little city lakes and whatnot and ride the skateboard and, steal lures out of the Payless drugstore because I wanted that that crankbait that I didn't have money for, and we grab a lure too and snuff it out, man, and
doing crankbaits instead of doing crank.
And then my uncle, he's actually in Florida now, but he was an avid outdoorsman, man, and he introduced me to a lot of that, and I would hear the stories of hunting, but I wouldn't. Back then you didn't, that wasn't something that we were involved in. I was the oldest of all, like say the cousins. So I'd get a little piece of the elk steak, but I would never get to go on the hunts. And then those stories always, kind of stayed with me. And we'd go to this lake in the Central Coast, Lake Cachuma. And I mean, that my fondest memories as a kid were spent at Lake Cachuma and not running around on my bike, riding a skateboard and running from guys that were trying to take either at any given moment. And that's really what I think that's what for me. And there's times where you lose sight, right? As a teenager, piss and vinegar, and it's about girls and parties and, weed smoking and, how many fights you can get in and not get your butt kicked type thing. And I don't know, man, I just never wanted to be a victim of my surroundings. You know what I mean? And I think a lot of that was very subconscious. I don't want to say that I had it that together as a kid, but I knew it never made sense to me. None of it ever clicked. I had buddies that to this day, that some of them are in prison. I grew up with a couple of twin brothers, and I remember seeing their dad. That was probably, I don't know, 23 years old. And I had been hunting a couple years, and the wife and I were just starting our family, and we started early. And I remember seeing him. I went for a doctor's visit, and I remember seeing their dad. And I lived across the street from this family for years, and asked, and he looked at me and he was like, "Oh my God." And we're talking. He told, his boys were actually a year older than me. And one of them was in jail for life. And one of them had been shot like 28 times, still running around as a gangster. And his new name was Lucky.
Good grief. Sounds like he'd been getting shot by a 6'5" Creedmoor.
Yeah, there it is. Shots fired, literally. So yeah, man, it was just, it was just something that I never took hold of. And like I said, there was instances, coming up where it was just like, what do you do? Right. You are influenced by your environment, and I don't care where you are, that's going to happen. And
Can you remember any specific examples of that?
Of
like times that you felt like you made a decision that made a difference, like you came up to a breaking point of, if I decide this, it's going to take me this way. If I decide this, it's going to take me the other way. That real fork in the road type of decision.
not, dude. Honestly, there was points where that was a daily decision, and that's legitimate.
No kidding.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to, I was probably, I'm gonna say in the neighborhood of somewhere with 13, 14 maybe, and was outside, and dude, I like to skateboard, right? You couldn't really skateboard in the hood.
Yeah.
And I'm doing that, and there's a guy hiding behind a bush, and then that guy blows out. Well, then I'm like, what the heck, right? And I look in the bush, and there's a 45, and there is a toiletry bag, and that toiletry bag, I grabbed it, both the 45 and the toiletry bag, out of there, and I opened it up, and it was full of these little, I don't know, 1/4-inch foil balls. Immediately knew what it was, right? That was just life growing up. And there's a decision to be made there, right? What do you do with this? Well, when you look around and everything you see is these guys doing that, and these guys have that, and these guys are involved with this guy, and look at them all over there hanging out and having fun, and you're this little oddball kid running around, wanting to ride a skateboard, doing it right next to the apartment building. There's a decision to be made. And the decision was drop that S and get in the house. Right. Yeah. And that, those, don't know why I made that decision. Probably, in that mindset, I was a punk. You know what I mean? Yeah. That would be the mindset of that. You're, oh, you just a punk kid, or that's fine. But I think that those are the turns that define, those type of decisions. You know what I mean? And they weren't always good ones, getting in fights and stuff like that. I'd see somebody, getting their butt whooped, and man, I used to love to fight. That was my thing. Like, if I could fight, I would fight, like, let's throw them. I had no problem with it. Get your butt kicked. Okay. I'll just come back again. Always, I enjoyed it.
You look like a tough guy. I wouldn't want to fight you.
I'm not going to say I'm a tough guy, dude. I would probably cry if I had to hit you now.
We'd both cry, man. You'd get arthritis. It'd hurt your hand. It hurt my face.
But you know what I mean? It's just, there's all these things, and you see it, and, I don't want to take credit for everything, right? I had it was me and my mother for years before she remarried. And I had a very, very, very good mother, as good as she could be with the tools she had as a single mother, trying to make it with nothing. You know what I mean? Like, with barely nothing. And she would support, those efforts of me wanting to go fishing. Hey, I want to go fishing. Okay. She'd grab me, and, we'd drive, and she'd take me and drop me off at, whatever little city lake or pond or whatever it is I was trying to cast spinner baits at bass in. And I'd spend the day by myself fishing, and the support of her and like my uncle, and spending, summers, and then my granddad with, we'd go fishing. And I mean, the fishing was an every weekend activity for me with one of them or by myself. So it was something that never clicked with me, man. Never clicked. And I always found something about being out fishing. And I remember, the reason I got enamored with hunting is we were on, and I don't even know that I truly knew what hunting was at that point, but my uncle had a Glastron tri-hull, and I can remember the boat like I'm sitting there, right? And it had the brown flake paint with the long kind of shaggy carpet, and the carpeted deck. And I remember being on Lake Achuma, and we were fishing one of my uncle's bluegill holes, and I'm dropping mealworms in, and the rule was don't look in the water at your bait, because you're not going to catch the fish that way. Just let them hit. I don't know why that was his rule. That was his rule. And seeing pigs and deer on the side of Kachuma Lake and just being enamored, man. Like, oh, I don't know where the hunting part of that came from, but there was something about that drew me to those animals. And I've just always kind of remembered that. And just, those memories of being out. My Uncle Glenn used to take me backpacking. And the one thing I will say is if you make the little bit of drive to, the Angeles National Forest, there's a lot of ground. And he used to take me, we go on, weekend backpack trips and, get in, the backcountry here. And I enjoyed that stuff, man. I enjoyed putting that backpack on and going out there and having him steal whatever little, good treats that mom packed in my pack, my Oreos. Tell me we're backpacking. You can't eat Oreos. So I'd have to eat, Vienna sausages, little bean and weenies. And he'd take my Oreos, man, go lay in his tent and eat them all. And I caught on to that pretty fast. But it was always those things that stood out more to me than being the cool guy, being that guy that needed that approval at that age. And, my teen years were slightly different. You go through high school and that's what matters. Right. And, what shoes are you wearing? What clothes you got on? How many friends you got? Are those friends in this, in this group, blah, 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 athletes and all that stuff. And lost sight of it. Right. I lost sight of what the outdoors meant to me and those experiences that to this day stay with me and outweigh all that experience. And when I could find myself back to it, I did immediately. And I found that void that was there because of, those teen years right after high school. Because I've been in the water a long time, and I started free diving, and I free dove for years and years. I mean, that was pretty much, I'd say in my teen years, that was what I did more than anything else, was free dove and then and fished. And I kind of lost that stuff. And then when I was able to get back, I went crazy free diving, and I've always had the hunting bug. And then, by that time I started to have the means. So I started doing my budget hunts and really fell in love with the entire experience, the waypointing, if you will, that hunting brings when you step off the beaten path and get your butt kicked, and that soul searching that it delivers, to your front porch, so to speak. And I'm not sure that's my, my long way about, I'm not even sure if I answered the question.
Yeah, I feel like you are. Let me ask you this though, and I know this is a sensitive thing, but do you feel like race was something that affected your life growing up?
It's funny. Okay. And hopefully people get offended, but hopefully people realize what I'm saying. It did, and it didn't. Okay.
And what is your heritage?
So I'm Creole is what it is. So, down South, it's Black, French, and American Indian. So where it affected me, and I think this is why I'm okay with being alone, because where I lived, I was too light to fit in. Okay. And then when my mom remarried, we moved away from the city, and now we are rural, and I was too dark to fit in. So there was this middle ground where I found myself in alone. And I had to figure that out. And I think that's why some of the teenage years were rough. Your nuts are dropping anyway. So there's always, those type of issues. And I don't care if you're, urban or rural, guys tend to find it when there's issues, right? If they're struggling through stuff. So I don't know that I don't harp on it. But there are differences there. When you don't fit on either side of the thing, right? You got this color spectrum, and you're and we hone in on the ends of the color spectrum so much that when you're finding yourself in the middle, there's, literally the gray area in the spectrum. You don't know which way to turn. But I don't know that I really, I don't want to say it didn't bother me, but I did not let it define me. Yeah. And I knew that couldn't define me. And I had to say this is who I am and be okay with either side of that.
So I don't know if you caught it or not. Did you see the report that Onyx just put out on all the stats that they got from the new hunters of last year?
No, I haven't seen it.
It's really, really interesting. So everybody saw that there was more hunters last year. Certainly felt like there were more hunters. It was harder to draw tags by a significant margin, it felt like. And basically across the board in the United States, hunting came up around 5%. I'm going to get some of these numbers wrong, so don't shoot me because I can't remember the entire report, but I do encourage you to look it up. You can find it on their website. But one of the things that I found interesting was that of all of the new hunters, 17% of them were minorities, which I think is more or less consistent with the demographics across the United States, probably a little bit less. So, hunting especially Western hunting is largely a Caucasian sport. Do you feel like you've been accepted or not? Or do you feel like that race thing, like your skin being too light or too dark, is that bled into the hunting community?
People are going to get mad at me. So, can I cuss? Okay, because
you can. My grandma listens to this show. She calls me after every show, but she's heard me cuss before. She's a grown lady.
Grandma, I'm sorry. But this is going to trigger me. Who gives a fuck, right? Yeah. And I'm glad to see minority level increase in this, right? Yeah. And to make this a hunting issue and not a socioeconomic issue, to make it a we're not represented issue. And sorry if you couldn't find it. I fucking found it, right? There's traditional minority hunters across this nation. Look at down south, right? I mean, I have stories from my grandparents, my grandmother hunting, right? I don't have an issue with it, but I remember, and you'll understand it a little bit more. When my kids were young, I think my daughter was probably 10 or 11, somewhere in there. My boy is 5 years younger than her. And they come to me, their school's right across the street. Dad, what are we? And I immediately knew what they meant. I said, you're Taylor and Guy. And they go, no, what are we? And I go, well, what are you asking? Well, my friends are asking what we are. And I said, you're Taylor and you're Guy. And anybody that asks you anything outside of the person you are is not your friend. So just walk away from them. That's how I raise my kids, man. You know what I mean? We get trapped in this shade of bullshit for what? And now we're under this guise of we have to support everybody in the demographic because it's unfair. It's not unfair. It's not hunting's fault that you didn't introduce, you don't know about hunting. Look at LA. I have a buddy, Caesar, right? And Caesar's been hunting now for 3 or 4 years. And he's a Hispanic guy, had no idea about it, got enamored with Aaron Snyder and archery and dude, what's the knock on guy? Dudley, sorry. Got enamored with those guys. I met Caesar at the range, and this guy was shooting for 4 or 5 years. And it's like, I don't think I'm ready to hunt. He had no idea, and he caught, grief from his family, but people don't understand when all you see is concrete, glass, and steel, and you don't know that there's opportunity there. They don't understand, but why that has anything to do with the color of your skin is beyond me. And why bring that for me? And going back to what I said about how it's made me a better person and how it's caused me to soul search and bring those problems to my doorstep and have self-realizations and take some of my demons and literally crush my demons because of the outdoors. That has, dude, Mother Nature, bears, the predators, whatever, they don't give a shit. I don't need, as much as I'd like to hunt with James Nash, I don't need James Nash to identify with me, to make me a hunter, to allow me to see value in the outdoors. I don't need that fucking approval, right? The approval that I need is that I went out, I set out to do something, I accomplished or I failed, but then I got back up and I kept striving for the next level. I don't know why that has taken such a stronghold. I'm absolutely thrilled that there are more people that are figuring out that they could go do it. But I wish some of those people wouldn't holler about how their race has affected them not to do it. If it's socioeconomic, that has nothing to do with hunting. That was your situation, but you found the outdoors. So just share that finding with someone else without starting their journey saying, well, you're a black man or you're a Mexican in the outdoors or whatever your race is. You know, I just don't understand how it even makes sense in the conversation. Like, I'm glad that you're out in the outdoors. I don't give a shit if you got a rainbow tattooed across your flipping face. It doesn't, where does that matter when we're out there?
I just don't want there to be anything that holds somebody up. So if there's something that you tell me that helps me understand what could be keeping somebody from doing it, and I can slay that dragon for them, then I'm going to do it.
Right.
But I also understand that if you grew up the way you did, okay, in a really urban area, that getting into the outdoors is a long bridge, right? And it's a scary thing. And people that live in town are scared of spending a night out in the woods. In the woods, in the wilderness, that's been a scary thing for a long time, and for good reason. Okay. It's a wild place where bad stuff can happen to you, but bad stuff can happen to you anywhere.
The likelihood of something bad happening in most of their neighborhoods, I shouldn't say most of, that's a very broad stroke,
sure,
right?
Some of, yeah.
Right. Some of these bad neighborhoods, you are more likely to have something bad happen to you there than you are on the mountain.
Sure. But just to help me understand it, I try to do a little position swapping. And if you were to take me and put me in that neighborhood that you grew up in, I would feel very uncomfortable. I would feel like, man, I don't know if I can make it here. Mm-hmm. And the reality is I could, right? I would figure it out, you know, and maybe something bad would happen. Maybe it wouldn't, but probably I would figure it out, because people are super adaptable. We're a really adaptable species. And that's why we live all across the world, because we've adapted to do so in all these different cultures and environments. And we're a really remarkable species in that way. But if there's anything that's holding you back, like, try to find somebody who's made it from where you are to where you want to be and talk to them, because more than likely they're going to be like, hey, this is how I did it. These are the mistakes I made along the way, and I encourage you to do it.
And honestly, there's nothing to be said about the color of your skin or your upbringing, or, you know what I mean? Like, if you have a passion for something, if you want, or just want to try something, I mean, there's nothing that really outside of us, and we are our worst enemies, right? We limit ourselves more than anybody else will. I don't see where it ties, man. I have a hard time with it. You know, again, the socioeconomic part of it. Well, I'll tell you what, like, my stepdad, right? I skate, snowboard. I want to hunt. He's like, you know, boy, that's redneck shit. What are you doing? You know, that's white boy shit. You go get on a surfboard. That's white boy shit. It's a cultural thing too, right? So because he wasn't used to it, and he was segregated, literally his lifetime, he was literally segregated from these activities because you couldn't do certain things. There's a difference there, right? But then that's passed down generationally. There's a mindset there that you can't do something because of the stigma on it, or it being, like you said, you know, predominantly, I'm not going to say Caucasian, a white thing. I don't like using the PC. I feel like that's PC. I don't care if James Nash is a white boy.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like this is thin ice. You know, it's thin ice for me to step on. But even in that case, I still am willing to, like, take the risk and have the conversation, because it's important to talk about.
I think so.
All this stuff is important to talk about, even if the answer is it's not that big of a deal. That's not what you should focus on. Like, I'm still glad that we hit the subject. Mm-hmm. So going from there, all right, you're an unlikely guy to end up in the elk woods. Okay. Just by the numbers, it's unlikely that you make it from the streets of LA into the woods with a bow in your hand, trying to convince an elk that you're an elk. So how did that happen? I mean, you're fishing, you see some pigs and some deer on the side of the reservoir or whatever it is. You're like, man, I kind of want to shoot one of those. Like, how did you take the step?
I convinced my wife to marry me, bro. You know, so So my daughter was she was a pretty high level soccer athlete, and looking at, well, that's kind of a way jump forward. So looking at the opportunity here in California, as I started delving into how do I partake, how do I get out and do this, you get your big game digest and you see all these different animals, dude. And I didn't know anything about Roosevelt's Rocky Mountains or the Tules, but I saw that I could apply to hunt them. So I just started applying to everything. Didn't know a daggum thing about them. And as I started exploring elk, it didn't trigger like it has in the last few years, because it was so hard to get a tag. I didn't realize I could hunt out of state for probably 7 or 8 years. And I was stuck for a while. I was hunting pigs. So I could hunt pigs year round and I didn't have to draw anything. I go down, and I think at the time, I think it was 3 tags. Maybe it was 2. It was 2 tags. You get 3 bobcat tags. And I wanted to hunt all the time. So it was like, give me as many pig tags as I can, and I'm going to chase. So I had this thing that I could just chase and learn and chase and learn. And then it got to a point where it's like, okay, I'm pretty daggum good at this. I can arrow pigs. I could find pigs, and didn't really have a huge issue with that. And I kind of graduated into chasing, deer. And, it was that period of the season where, let's step up the game. I could still hunt pigs. So I'd have the pig tag. And then I tried to find areas where there was, where I could hunt both deer and pig. Right. So now I'm out there on these 2 tags at the same time, and being more efficient in it. And, over the time hunting the pigs, I'd see deer, and then, started to really hone in on that. And then this part of it. So I was hunting, I was doing good. I'd bring, my daughter was a high level soccer player. We'd have barbecues and stuff, and I'd bring pig or I'd bring deer, and met a gentleman, Tom, and his daughter played soccer with my daughter in the same club. And he's like, oh man, you hunt? And I'm like, yeah, dude, I bow hunt primarily. And he goes, you should come to Colorado with us. We hunt elk. And he started showing me these pictures, man. And the first pictures he showed me was of the landscape. It wasn't even of the animals. And it was just like, wow, right? You see all the color change in the aspens, right? And it was just like, I got to do that. And looking at doing it the way they were doing, I couldn't afford it at the time. They were going, and they were on private, so they're spending at the time probably $5 to $7 grand. And that was something that I wouldn't take money from my family. I always put them first. Didn't matter if I had it or not. Nope, I'm not spending that. It's too much money. So it was something that I just put on the back burner and just kept hunting pigs and deer and applying here. I figured if I can get a tag here, it's only going to cost me a few $100s. I can save up for that. And, the table wouldn't fill it, so to speak. And then as time went on, and I started going, oh man, my points are climbing, right? My points here are getting up there. I'm going to start really looking at this animal and try to, learn this animal. And the wife and I, one year, were driving up to go snowboarding. I think we were going up to Mammoth. So we were on the 395. I think we were just going through Lone Pine or just past it, and hit the brakes. I hit the brakes, and we're in I forget what that Honda Accord was, like a 92 Honda Accord, and hit the brakes, man. And there's 300 head crossing the road. And that was the trigger right there. When I saw that animal in front of me, 40 yards, that was the trigger. How do I do this? How do I get after this animal? And it was just like, I gotta figure it out. And I just started looking at everything I could. And then that's when I hit Tom up, and I'm like, hey man, how do you know, where are you guys going? And what's this, what's that? And still, I felt like it was out of touch dollar wise. And I'd say that was, I think a year went by. So I was like, I told my wife, every penny that you bring in your purse, I'm stealing it. I told my kids, you guys have lunch over, quarters, dimes, put them in this jar. And if they left a quarter sitting around, dude, I'd grab that quarter and I'd put it in that jar. And I was determined within 2 years to go hunt elk. And I had saved, legit saved like $1,000 in change, just under $1,000 in change in singles, so I could pay for an elk hunt. And had an opportunity. I talked to a guy and he goes, "Hey man, I was at the archery shop and he goes, yeah, we're hunting Wyoming and we're hunting elk and blah, blah, blah. And we're going in as a group and we're hunting on this property." And again, I couldn't afford what they were hunting. I said, "Man, I can't do $4,000. And he goes, "Well, if you want, to apply with us, we got enough points, we'll be happy to put you in the group and you just, do what you can do." So I applied with them and got lucky, man. My first year applying for elk, and that's what landed me in Wyo. And dude, went through all the maps, and I used to Google everything, right? I Google Earth everything. That's how I found deer areas. I Google Earth, and you zoom in, and somebody posted a picture, and there's a deer. I'd go hunt the area, and I kind of did the same thing. And then Wyoming is crazy because it's so checkered. And I found, where I thought I could get in. And I was planning to go hunt, and there was grizzlies, and I was like, "Nope, not doing the grizzly thing."
Yeah.
And it wasn't wilderness, and while you can't go in the wilderness as non-res. And was talking to a guy at one of the little taverns, and he said, "Yeah, you could try this. There's walk-in access." And said, "Okay." Found me a little camp spot the next day, opened the truck door, and elk were bugling, dude. And it was downhill from there. And I haven't looked back since.
So I feel like we're still on one of these first questions. So we've
Okay.
got a good image of what your life was like before.
Okay.
Now we have it happening. Okay. You're in Wyoming. You wake up, there's elk bugling, you have an elk tag, it's happening. What's your life like after that? Like what changed?
In terms of life in general?
Sure. Who you are as a person, like anything, like
Okay.
how did it change you? Or did it?
It did. Part of that, my kids, my daughter graduated, she went off to college. My boy was in high school or just going into high school, and I wasn't coaching anymore. I wasn't going to sporting events all weekend, blah, blah, blah. So it gave me an opportunity to increase my knowledge, my time, my skill sets, and really pursue the things that I wanted to start to pursue a little bit heavier. Because I didn't, when she was playing soccer, we'd be at tournaments every single weekend. I think we had 3 months off or 3 weeks off a year. And that first hunt, I think really did it right. And it was kind of, I walked in, met a guy, walked in, we go in an hour after, gray light, there's a bull arrowed. I'm glad. And I hate that story to a point. And that bull run off. He died. Couldn't find him. We lost blood. And he was poached out. And I think that was the catalyst, right? I mean, just that roller coaster of emotions was like, I have to do this all the time. I have to improve. And as much as I can blame the guys that rode up and scabbed my elk, I look at shot placement, right? And I'm like, man, I'm a damn good shot with my bow. But as I replay, I have that on video. And as I replay that, I'm like, okay, that's a little bit high and further back than I wanted. So how do I improve upon this, right? And dang, when I was blood trailing this guy, my lungs were taking a whooping. So how do I improve that? My calling stank, right? I had, I tried to I didn't know what I was doing. I'm bugling, right? And it's just like, I didn't know I should be saying anything. But I knew where I wasn't getting responses, and where I was getting responses in whatever I call that first year calling. So it just made me come back to the drawing board and say, I'm never going to have another elk run off and I can't recover or risk that again. And that's I've never not recovered an animal. I've never not missed an animal or had any issue up until that point. And I mean, you're talking years now, right? I mean, I started this I think I was 23. I'm pushing, shit, I just made 47, dude. I hate even saying that. It's kind of weird. So you're, years of not missing an animal, not recovering an animal. And having that happen, it was just like, that's all she wrote. So an elk is weird for me. I started going down the road and I started really delving into this animal and the social interaction. and watching the improvements in myself as I was at the gym for, 3-4 hours a night, getting ready for it and shooting my bow and being more meticulous in shot placement and really refining the technical aspect of my game and understanding archery more, trajectory, things like that. Just really, it just opened the door up. And then it was just consume. Well, at the end of the day, I'm like, damn, I feel better. I'm a bit smarter and I'm ready. I'm ready to go do this. And I think I had a conversation with you and I was like, dude, I thought I deserved it. And you put in all that work and you see these improvements and it's like, I'm grinding, I'm doing the damn thing. And then I realized, and I think I realized it after our conversation, I said, damn, I really said that. I thought I deserved it. And I think it was at Hunt Expo, dude. It was at the SIG booth. And I was like, yeah, man, I'm going after him this year, bro. I deserve it. I worked my butt off. And after that realization hit me and it's like, I don't deserve anything. I got to go earn all of that. I wish I didn't say that to James right now. And that was another one of the realizations. But, in terms of the change, man, I go into the woods and I can be carrying the stress of life on me and the pursuit. Like I said, it brings it to your front door. And it makes you check yourself, right? The struggles and the challenges. And as cliche as I can sound about that stuff, it makes you leave it there. Either you're going to open the front door and allow yourself to walk out, or you're going to leave the package on the door, keep the door closed, and then, close the wood door behind the screen door, so to speak, and never have any growth. And just the feeling of that growth and that self-improvement, that's been a constant. The improvements that I see, and my wife and I have a great marriage. I'm lucky. Like, I'm married up in more ways than one. But to see a light come on from her when I get back, and to realize that, wow, that light is me because of these improvements. I can't get enough of that, man. As much as I like chasing the animal, I love chasing self-improvement and the betterment that I've found in chasing that animal. And can I be better? Hell yeah. Well, I got a long way to go.
That's really beautifully said. And, I'll fully agree that you married up. Your wife is awesome. Yeah.
Thank you, man.
I distinctively remember meeting her. She's a jerky fiend, right?
Yeah. Oh, she could eat some jerky.
Yeah. I remember she was shopping down all the jerky she could find at the Hunt Expo.
Yeah, man.
Good place for it.
What's funny is I think we spent $250 on jerky.
Hey,
at
money
that
well
show.
spent. Money well spent. That's only like a pound of jerky anyways, right? That stuff.
That's crazy, expensive. Right? That's why I was like, what are you doing? And we bought some and it was refrigerated. They were like, well, if you're going to keep walking around, I think I had episodes to do, and they were like, just come back and get it. And it was like $70 of jerky. And we never went back. And we're on the airplane. I'm like, oh no, we just gave them $70.
Well, I didn't make it to Sheep Show this year. Last time I was there was a couple years ago, maybe 3 years ago. I can't even remember. But we had a big night out in the casinos and stuff after the last night of the show. And I'd gotten all the way back here to Oregon and started unpacking my stuff. And I found a receipt from the casino that said that they owed me like $1,700.
Oh, man.
Yeah. So I left I don't know how much I spent to get $1,700 from them, but yeah, definitely left like some on the table.
Copious amounts of scotch on that one.
Yeah, there was some scotch involved. Gosh dang it. They bring it to you. They know what they're doing.
Yeah.
Anyways. Is your wife going to make it to Expo this year?
Yeah, she's been away. I actually just got our passes today.
Cool.
I just reached out to get our media passes. So yeah, she'll be there. She enjoys it. And, she's a non-hunter and she's been going out into the woods with me these last couple years chasing elk. And that's been phenomenal. And she knows what it means to me. And this is part of the married up part, right? She knows how important it is to me and the improvements and how much I love it. And she's right there filming as I'm podcasting and help me with the tech stuff, while I go through all that. So it's phenomenal. And she's made some really good friends, I guess, in the industry that she goes and enjoys some time with and whatnot.
It's a great show too. I really encourage people to check that one out. Dates, what is it? 10
February
through 13?
10th through the 13th this year. Yes.
Yep.
And it's nice this year, right?
Salt Lake
It's
City.
opposite. Yeah, it's opposite the Portland show.
Yep.
So that'll be nice. I think that last year they were at the same time, so it kind of hurt.
Yep. Yeah, I went straight from Portland to Expo last time. It wasn't last year, it was the year before that. Yeah, no, I do encourage people to go if you're in the area or if you're interested. It's a really friendly show, easy to walk around in. You'll meet a lot of cool people, and it's a great opportunity for me to connect with people. And I'm sure it's the same way for you. I'm sure people are coming up to you and being like, hey, I really like listening to Western Contours. This was my favorite episode. And, they just want to shake your hand and see you. And by the way, for those that don't know, Guy's the host of Western Contours. He's one of my favorite voices in hunting, period.
Thank you, man.
Yeah, it's a tremendous show. You do such a good job. And, I've been attracted to it from the very beginning. And I can't encourage people enough to go check that one out. Do you feel like if there's just like one introductory episode for people to listen to, is there anyone that stands out in your mind that they can figure out whether they like it or not?
And it's changed so much. I would have to say probably one of the most recent episodes, call it 264 on up. I think 266. I'm doing these Wapiti episodes, but I've done a couple with Jim Huntsman and Joe Gillia where we're just kind of digesting and venting, on things that we feel like we can improve in on hot topics and stuff. But I think if you're interested in understanding where I am, and I think, I think with podcasts, right, people connect with the host and the message before they connect with anything. And I think that these, 260 up, I think those will give you guys, if you're interested, a good idea of who I am and what I value in terms of, hunting in our demographic and what I really want the show to be about. Or listen to the new intro. I mean, you want a 30-second hit, it'll tell you what it's about in that 30-second hit with the new intro.
Great. What's this year hold for you hunting wise?
So I was 1127th in line, got my Idaho tag.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So I had a 10 or 12 minute wait in line and got the Idaho tag, and pretty happy about that. I haven't hunted Idaho. I haven't been to Idaho in years.
What zone?
Weezer.
Okay. That's really close to me, dude. That's really close to me. Yeah. That's like 3 hours away.
We may have to, might have to speed over.
I can help. Help.
Yeah. So I got Weezer, and then my little buddy Diego Otero down in New Mexico is going to be guiding me. So I'll be his first client on a guided hunt. And it's a great opportunity, right, to go down to New Mexico. It's a PLM tag, of course. That's how I know I'm going. We've been planning that for a couple years, and absolutely love that kid, what he's about. And I think, he's a shining star in what we do. And I really wanted to support him in any way, shape, or form. So we're going to go down there. I'm going to hunt on that tag, and he's going to be my guide, which will be fun because I'm working on him and is calling right now. He's like, "Are you going to call him?" I'm like, "No, dude, if you're the guide, it's all on you, man. I'm going to sit back and I might help you pack it out, but you're the guide, brother. Let's see what you got."
Nice.
And then, we're packing up to get out of here.
Yep.
We'll be, moving.
You are.
So I'll have, we're getting out of here, dude. I'm done with this place. I can't hunt elk. I can't live with elk. And that's one of the things that is, it really is that important to me. I want to be around them. I want to know them. I want to understand them. And I can't do that on 12 and 18-hour drives. And it's about high time anyway. I'm tired of looking at concrete, asphalt, and shiny steel everywhere.
So I remember talking to Ryan Maid, who's a naval psychologist, who's been on the show, and it was when I was still active duty. I was at Wounded Warrior Battalion back in North Carolina, and his office was next to one of the bombing ranges on base. And I remember talking to him, and he's like, "Well, what do you feel like you need? Like, what is the thing that is gonna like really make a difference in your health?" And where the windows are shaking from this artillery hitting. And I said, Doc, I just want to be in a place where I've got a shot at seeing an elk every day.
Mm-hmm.
And that was such a strange thing, I'm sure, for him, but that was really what I felt. And it's something that I still hold on to today. If I have a day in my life where there's a chance that I can see an elk, that's going to be a really good day. It's going to be a good day.
Yes,
I had one of those days today, did not see an elk, but I was in a place where I could have. And that made it a good day. And it really does make a difference. So
you see,
I'm happy for you, buddy. I'm happy
Thank
for
you,
you,
brother. Yeah. It's funny because I tell people that and they're like, why are you moving? And I'm like, well, we can talk politics and we can talk, tired of being urban. But it's really, a lot of it has to do with me wanting to be around these animals, and people will laugh and they don't understand it. And then I realized that I need to tell them the story and tell them what's delivered from those animals. And it's such a great conversation, especially when I have that conversation with people that don't hunt or don't get the animal, and they'll look and they're like, man, that is just an amazing animal. And I'm like, exactly, move me where they are and we're okay.
Yeah. It's a part of who we are as a species. And I am thinking about this more and more lately. And I've heard that if you go back 60,000 years, that if you saw a Homo sapiens that was, 60,000 years old, dressed like us, sitting on a bus, that you wouldn't think anything was up. Like they pretty much looked then like we look now. I just saw a really cool kind of graphic that was built around a skeleton that was found in Morocco that they think is about 300,000 years old. And it's not very different either. I don't think that I would see that guy on a bus and think, wait a second, you're a different species. So only for the last, few thousand years have we lived with agriculture. Before that, hunting was everything about who we are.
Sure.
Being in a tribe was everything about who we were. And I really think that that's why when we get back into it, that it feels so right. It feels like this thing that we're craving that we didn't have. And then when you get it again, it's like, oh, this is part of who I am. And I think it's part of who we are as a species.
Yes, sir. There's no way that anybody could make me believe that isn't fact.
Yeah.
And I'm living proof of it. Right. I mean, it sets my soul on fire to talk about them, to see them, to think about them. I mean, I love my wife. I love my family, man. I open my eyes and it's like the most days it's something about the pursuit, right? It's something about what I'm doing today to further that or further the move and how I can improve for September. What do I have to learn today? And man, it's amazing. I freaking love those animals, dude.
Yeah. They're cool. They're a cool animal.
And they don't just let you kill them.
No,
That's the plus with them, right? I mean, can you imagine what a different animal that would be if they just let you kill them? I mean, that might sound odd, but if it was as easy as it could be, I don't know that it would set us on fire as much.
No. And people lose touch with that, and they think that their hunt is all about them, but to the animal it's life and death. But it's life and death for them every single day. We live in a time where our health and comfort are fairly secure, so it doesn't feel like life or death for us. It feels like success or failure, maybe.
Yes, sir.
To be defined by everyone as an individual. But for that animal, it's life and death, but that's nothing new for them. And there's no pity involved, that it's just life, but it's a beautiful life. And when you get to participate in that, something awakens in just about everybody that does it, that feels very right.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. It is, it's next level, man.
So if you were to break it down into one thing, that if you could only improve one thing about your elk hunting game for the year of our Lord 2022, what's it going to be?
Knowledge of the animal.
Okay.
Biology, things like that. Calling. I'm that drive around guy I got my little tube in the truck, and gets blown and drive the wife crazy and the neighbors probably hate me. You know, I can go to the bow range and I can shoot, but increasing my knowledge of the animal itself and understanding their behaviors more, their biology more, that has always been important, but it's been increasingly important. And I, not so much for the hunt, but just because of my love for the animal, my respect for the animal, my enamoration with the animal. So that's really been a focus for me for a little while.
Have you found any good resources for learning that yet?
Dude, I read everything I can. I've been, you know, the last probably 7 months, I've been looking at a lot of the older books about them. I one of them that the American elk or American wapiti is, you know, was published in, I think the first copyright on it was 1951. And I've just been delving into that to kind of, you know, get some insights of the history. And it's been, I mean, we consider 3 species of elk is all we really know. It's all we really talk about. And then, you know, you get back into that and you see that, you know, there's 6 different species that they're talking about in there. And it was pretty impressive. And then to see their sprawl on the landscape across the country was just, it's just absolutely impressive. So I'm really enjoying that one right now.
So I had a podcast listener send in a scientific document about the Merriam's elk a while ago, the last time that I talked about Merriam's elk. Very, very interesting. And I saw you just posted a map that included Merriam's on it.
Yes.
So that species, as it turns out, was classified on only 2 examples of animals. So they only had 2 specimens that they classified the species off of. And they were both bulls, and they were both spectacular bulls that people had kept around. And they weren't classified until the 1900s. So these bulls had been kept around, just these antlers, for 30 or 40 years. And they were both very big. Of course, that would be the type of bull that you keep around, right? Mm-hmm. Genetic testing on them has shown that one of those was not genetically different from the Rocky Mountain elk from, say, Jackson Hole, Wyoming, even though it was killed in the Southwest. Wow. One of them had some genetic tags that showed some differentiation. But upon really closer analysis, there's a legitimate question about whether the Merriam's was a distinct species or not. Mm-hmm. And prior to reading that, I would have told you that not only were they distinct, but I don't think they ever went extinct. And I think that they probably became a hybrid with the elk that were reintroduced. Because at the time that they said that they were extinct, we didn't have aircraft yet. So, you know, to say there's no more elk left in the Grand Canyon or no more elk left in the mountains of New Mexico was a really big boast. That would be a difficult thing to know, right, just by moving around on foot or horseback or something like that. Mm-hmm. But man, I think that there's this big open space, this big frontier of science that is left out there as we learn more about genetics, and we can start actually figuring out, okay, is this a different species? Is it the same species, but there's something different about them? And it sure seems like it. Like they look like a different animal down there. Right. The elk in eastern Montana look different. The elk in Wyoming and eastern Oregon and Idaho, like they all look different. They act different. But I don't know. It's fun to think about. I love the science end of it.
Well, I was posed with something last September, and a buddy of mine was saying, yeah, you know, our elk, he's in southern Colorado and he hunts, you know, northern New Mexico a bit. And he's saying that they're a Roosevelt hybrid. And I never considered it. I never heard of it. And he's showing me pictures and I'm like, and maybe there's a little bit to that, you know, when somebody tells you something, you kind of see it. And I haven't delved into it, but I'm pretty curious to get into that and pick it apart a little bit to see if there's, you know, anything I could find that would lead me down to that thought process. But it was pretty interesting to see the characteristics and, you know, that rosy feature on that snout in the elk down there. It was pretty neat. Could you send me what you had on the Merriam's? I'd love to read that.
Yeah, I'll see if I can find it. And I'll get it over to you. I don't know how legitimate Roosevelts are as a species anymore. You know, by the record book, their territory is divided by an interstate.
Mhm.
So if it's west of I-5, it's a Roosevelt. If it's east of I-5, it's suddenly a Rocky Mountain elk. And these elk cross the interstate. So there's a complication, right?
Yeah.
I don't think that it becomes a different species by crossing an interstate, but they have to draw the line somewhere, I guess. I do know that the elk that were reintroduced to Eastern Oregon were brought here to Wallowa County, where I live, to a place called Billy Meadows. And it's a Forest Service ranger station. And when I was in high school and right out of high school, I actually fought fire at this ranger station. And it's 50 miles of dirt road from the nearest town, which ain't much. It was such a cool place to live and fight fire. Like it was just an awesome spot. But back in the early 1900s, they built these like 40-acre pens, maybe even bigger than that. And that's where they brought these elk in from Jackson Hole. They brought them in on trains, and then they put them in carts and brought them in wagons until they ran into snow. And then they fitted them with skis. And there's actually pictures of them bringing these elk in cages on skis that they're pulling with horses, and just massive amounts of snow, like 5 feet of snow off each side. And those were the elk that they reintroduced here. They kept them in those pens for a little while to make sure they weren't bringing in any disease, kicked them loose. They tried that again. I think they brought in like 8 head the first time, 13 head the second time. And those are the elk that really repopulated this area, even though we know that there were some elk that were still here. Now, later on, the elk population really crashed on the Oregon coast, and they captured elk here in Wallowa County, and they put them on trains and took them over to the Oregon coast to Astoria. So we know that there's Rocky Mountain elk genetics that are mixed in with whatever it was there. It's just tough to say what is a Roosevelt, what is a Rocky. Are there still Manitoban elk? They're fun questions to wrestle with, but it's really all hypothetical until you actually have the DNA and can break it down.
Yep.
And I have no idea. I don't know enough about DNA. Maybe that's my goal for this year, is to learn more about DNA and actually start sending in samples.
I've always been impressed with your data collection, and just taking the feces and the scat, and so you can understand what's going on with with your herd there. I mean, that's always stood out to me, because as we get into the elk hunting world and the knowledge base and things like that, a lot of it is about the technical, call it stuff, right? Is that shooting, or can I call, or I should call it the superficial stuff, honestly. So good up on you, man. I appreciate the mentorship and the education that you provide, and delving into some of the topics that we just don't see much, we don't hear a lot about. And there's efforts there. I remember the first time we podcasted for my show, and you're talking about your efforts, the efforts there with the conservation, and some of the challenges that you found there, and why you guys did what you did. I mean, I don't know that I don't know an individual that I can say has done that much for that animal, to make sure that he understands and promotes them and understands what it's going to take to continue to see them on the landscape. So thank you for that.
Well, thanks for saying so. It's this classic Socratic conundrum, right? The more you learn, the more you realize you don't know anything at all.
Mm-hmm.
And that's fun, as long as you're cool with that and understanding, like, it's okay, I don't know anything.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm still curious and I can learn more. Gosh, that's the best feeling for me, is like there's this frontier of knowledge. Like there's so much more to learn. And I encourage people to start learning, just in case you're that type of person that knowledge becomes a catalyst for, or an appetite for learning even more.
Yes.
It's a really great thing.
Yep. Find that thing.
Yeah.
Whether it's elk or, blacktail, mule deer, find that thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you wear out one of them, then find something else.
That's it.
Well, buddy, I really appreciate your time. I'm so excited that I get to see you in person in a couple weeks.
Yeah,
it's going to
brother.
be fun.
It's going to be cool.
I'm going to bring a bag of jerky for your wife so that she doesn't have to, spend all of her hard-earned money on that, on the stuff that's there. And yeah, it's going to be great. I hope to see hope to see a bunch of people at the Hunt Expo. I'll be at the SIG booth the whole time. So stop on by. If you see me with the headset on, I've probably got an extra headset sitting next to me. Plop on down. We can talk about stuff. I like talking to people, but I really like talking to you, Guy. And
I appreciate that, brother.
Yeah, man, just thank you for your time, and looking forward to seeing you.
Thank you, man. You too. And yeah, I'll be in the initial scent booth. So we'll definitely cross paths if I have to hunt you down.
Okay. Sounds great, buddy.
Man. Thanks, man.
So I found this old ad, and there's like dudes dressed up like construction workers, and a guy's got a jackhammer, and there's a crane, and they're moving all these big steel beams and stuff.
Aladdin Stanley Thermos. Stanley, the top all steel thermos bottle that's completely dependable.
They're showing this thermos like falling off this building and hitting all this other construction stuff.
And built to take a bounding year after year. Get the top one.
Oh, it lands in a wheelbarrow. The guy grabs it out of the wheelbarrow. Now he's going to pour himself a cup of coffee. I love these cheesy old ads. And most of the time, like, they're lying to us, right? That's most of what marketing used to be, was just like telling a lie, or at least telling a version of a lie that made you think that you needed this thing. But I'll tell you what, when it's cold out like it is right now, the only way to keep liquid and not freezing in your pack is by putting it in something that's insulated. So packing a thermos in the wintertime is really smart, whether it's for a hot beverage like coffee, or if you just want to bring some water with you, which is a really important thing if you're going to be out adventuring around in this snow that we've got all over the country. And I think you should be, because it's a great time of year to get out and about. This is both a comfort and a safety thing. If you want to get something from Stanley, which I encourage you to do, you can use the discount code 6RANCH. That's the number 6 in the word ranch, and that'll get you 25% off of just about anything on their website. I encourage you to do that. They're great supporters of the show, and great supporters of this audience, and I love you guys. So stay warm out there, have a nice warm drink, and make sure you're drinking it out of a Stanley product. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and share the show with a friend. You can also rate the podcast and leave a review. Your support allows me to keep doing what I love, which is meeting incredible folks and sharing their stories with you. For more content and photos, follow the show on Instagram at 6Ranch Podcast, or me at 6Ranch Outfitters. This episode was produced by Emily Brannigan, with original music written and performed by Justin Hay. Art for the 6Ranch Podcast was created by John Chatelain and digitized by Celia Christofferson. Tune in every Monday for a brand new episode of the 6Ranch Podcast. I'll catch you next week.